Welcome everyone to the follow-up that we've had from Mary Magdalene, the Mirror 4. So today we're going to cover a little bit of ground. I'm going to introduce Mary Magdalene as the Lightbearer and her role in traversing the light and the dark, or the earthly and the heavenly planes, how she was a Deathwalker. Okay, I'll just get that person. There's Rosa. And then we're going to be revisiting the Mary Magdalene dance, which will bridge into Stella Noora's offering. And there we're going to have a look at crossing the sacred threshold. We'll do a little meditation. We'll look at stages of dying, how to address grief, and we'll look at the second beatitude there. And then I will finish up with the Mary Magdalene qualities and as a sacred presence, and how we can develop this in our life and at that time when we need that assistance for someone passing over as well. So welcome, and I'll just see if there's anyone else I need to bring in. Not yet. Hello, Rosa. It's fine.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yes, nice to be here.
Okay. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is some more gleanings that I've got from the book called The Secret Teachings of Mary Magdalene, talking about Mary being the light bringer. So we talked about Mary being the feminine expression of the soul, and whose masculine expression was Yeshua, or Jesus. And she was far older than the earth, an individual spark of divine light, in order to flood the soul. In order to flood the soul planes of the earth with divine light. So she's had a number of visitations on the earth in different forms, way back, Isis and maybe even before. She was aware of the sisterhood between Venus, Moon and the earth. So as a Deathwalker and someone who was familiar with the stages of passing in and out of life and death, she was very familiar, more at the soul plane level, but the time when she incarnated as Mary Magdalene, that was her real experience of the density of the earth. Must have been hard for those incredible light beings who'd had so many aeons of experience as light bringers and helping the earth on the outer planes to come in and then, be in this physical dimension with all the suffering and all the expressions of life that it has to offer. And be these light bearers, these light bringers. Now, very interesting that her number is 9, and we have this in the word feminine. Feminine has got a 9 in it. So 2 of the numbers, number 9 and number 8, is also her number. It's a sacred balance between the physical and spiritual realms of consciousness, which dwells in the heart. So light and darkness are 2 complementary forces, just like life and death, creating all goodness and perfection in beautiful order. So Mary Magdalene was also the goddess Isis and Ishtar. She was the moon goddess. And the mystery of the great darkness that the solstice moon celebrated was associated with that which was hidden and secret, not of evil. So the church made it evil. But what the darkness was that which was hidden and which was secret. So the moon's path was that path of gnosis, which was the knowledge of the divine. And the deeper self of Mary Magdalene never left the heart of the Divine Mother. Usually she descended down to the soul dimension only, the higher etheric of Mother Earth, from where she would instruct, guide and inspire. And again, like I said, she was born into this body of flesh to help us. And this is a very interesting chapter. It talks about the first civilization being in the North Pole, which had a very temperate climate back in those days. And their task was to build this beauty and perfection into its existence. And at first, ever-evolving humanity yearned to realize the eternal mysteries of the spirit. But power and greed took over, and there was a global cataclysm. Hello, what's happening now? There was a polar wobble which created evolution to go backwards, and there was a power struggle. So what we have was we see Mary being crucified by the imposition of a mentality that made her into an outcast or a whore. But back in the old days, the Sumerians, when they elected a priest king or a priestess king, they introduced the concept of the throne, and they, in their spiritual evolution, they were very highly evolved. Their direct line was this kingship was about service and surrender to the people. It wasn't about power and greed and all that comes with it. So, and there was a direct line of spiritual communication from the higher spheres, which infused spiritual discernment, compassion, courage, and a kindly justice. So the only remnants that we can remember that could be like that would be King Solomon, King Arthur. We had Camelot at that time, which was like a heaven on earth, just before the 6th century. And Mary teaches us to enter into the heart of things, to learn sacred power of adaptability, to flow like water, to become powerful sources of light. Water is gentle, but a great wave can clear all the obstructions out of our path. So Mary is the compassionate and the light bringer. She bears the pure white light, the alabastron, the jar of light, with which she baptizes us all into eternal life. Now, very interesting, before she was made a prostitute and a whore, we also have Muhammad having his revelations. And back in the pre-Islamic tradition, they had the 3 supreme female deities, and one of them was called Al-Uzza, the mother. She was the black tone. And Allah, who was a being of all, his being and nothingness, the shining darkness through which all the Godhead manifests, had this Godhead and the goddess within him. And Muhammad said that the God and goddess were both to be revered equally. But later on, the people who took over called these verses the satanic verses, and they were removed. So Al-Uzza, which was really Mary Magdalene, embodied, and who was also the goddess of 8, the goddess of this darkness and light, infinity, the temporal plane and the eternal plane interwoven, and whose church was the true light, was disposed of at the same time as Mary Magdalene was made the whore, 40 years after Camelot was destroyed. I thought that was really interesting. Now, for Mary Magdalene, one of her symbols is the skull. She is the Deathwalker. So she was very comfortable with this, with being the Lightbearer between the transitions. And some say that she was the one, well, it is said that she was the one who helped Yeshua through transverse all the realms between life and death and come back in another form. So at the same time, of course, that Mary Magdalene was derobed, defrocked from her spiritual authority, then Mother Mary was raised on the pedestal. So that's where we saw the pure Virgin Mary was the symbol of the divine feminine, but she'd been taken, all the power of the earthy power of Mary Magdalene was taken away from her. So she was considered to be the celestial embodied Mother Mary who would help us. But of course, within Mother Mary is also Mary Magdalene. So having said that, we go back to the alabaster jar, and I'll take it over to Stella Noora. We're going to do a revision of that dance. And in the alabaster jar, it's said that the house really is Mary Magdalene's body. The fragrance of the soul is Mary Magdalene. So do you want to say something more about that,
Yes.
Stella, and then I'll put the music on.
Yes, all right. So we're going to revisit this beautiful dance, the alabaster jar. And Anna Sophia mentioned that the jar was filled with light, and it's the light of Mary Magdalene. This jar in this dance is, the jar is the container for the soul. And so as we dance, we represent that jar by the crescent movement, and I'll explain that again in a moment. So the fragrance of the oil, the fragrance of the soul, we're talking about the oil being the essence of the soul, and the fragrance is also that soul essence. And Mary Magdalene is filled with the soul essence and the fragrance. And it is said that as the fragrance extended and expanded from within her, out from her, so everywhere was filled with this soul essence of Mary Magdalene, and both her light and her soul essence. And so this dance is embodying that vision, really, of Mary Magdalene. So before you put the music on, I might just go through the movements again, just so everyone knows them. Now, I'm not quite sure about my computer, how much you see of me. I'm not quite sure. I can't get my computer to show my feet, but I think most of you know how we do it. And
No, it's a bit distracting.
okay. Perhaps I'll just do as much as I can with what you can see. So we bow to the left and we bow to the right. And as we step to the right, we do this lovely crescent move. And this crescent is the jar. We do that again. We bow to the right, the left, and then the right. And then we step to the left and we do the crescent left to right. And we bow. So now we're doing Adonai Yeshua. And we use our hands, as we walk in 4 steps, we use our hands to honor the devotion of Mary Magdalene to Jesus, to Yeshua. And we're just putting our hands down, representing that devotion to his feet, because she anoints his feet with the spikenard. And as we step out on the right foot, we raise this beautiful energy and fragrance right from our hands, opening our palms right up and letting that fragrance right out into surrounding us. So some of you know the dance already, and we'll sing it and see how we go. Trying to see if I can. Can't do anything different, so sorry about that. I have no picture either of Anna or anyone else. Are you there, Anna?
Yes, we're all here. I've just
All
put
right.
you on speaker form here, so
All right.
everyone can see you now.
All right. Do you want to put the music on now?
Oh, yes. Next. Right.
We'll wait.
Mute yourself. You're coming up in the space. Mute yourself.
I'm sorry again.
The alabaster jar contains the oil of my devotion. The alabaster jar contains the oil of my devotion. Adonai Yeshua,
Oh. So that brings us into this beautiful energy of Mary Magdalene. And we hear of her light energy and that she is a light worker. And she is a Miro for working with oils and very, very familiar with death and dying. And we could call her a Deathwalker. We could call her a soul midwife. We could call her a doula. So in these modern times, there are other names for such work. And people who take this role or this become a Noora for, this is like a vocation, deeply connected to that Mary Magdalene energy of compassion and care for someone who is dying. And so we talk about crossing the threshold. And of course, this is where Mary Magdalene was with Yeshua. She virtually walked with him or was with him through the crucifixion and at his death. And so she knew what he was going to be facing. And he would be standing or at the threshold. These days, of course, we would say, oh, well, he or she's at death's door. And of course, what we mean is that they are at this very place of sacredness before they step through this sacred threshold. Now, this sacred threshold really has a very, very powerful energy because we're stepping from this physical world of matter to a space of absolutely expansive vibration into another space altogether. And the threshold is that boundary that separates us from life and death. And I just would like to read you just a short description. And this is from Felicity Warner, who has written a lot about death and dying, and she imagines she has a deep understanding of being at the threshold. And so she gives it some, I suppose, archetypal images. And so some people imagine it as a slow flowing river, a chasm between crystal glaciers, a rainbow bridge, a land where sea and sky meet. But sometimes it is a whirling maelstrom where two mighty oceans merge. She speaks of her own experience. I am struck by its vastness, its strange sense of altered time, the unfamiliar boundaries that don't relate to any other recognizable physical or spiritual framework. It is magnificent. And as death occurs, the spirit detaches from the body with a rapid upward flight. And at the same time, there is a countering balance, a brooding, restless cloud of chaotic darkness. And this is the doldrums of the deep soul, the bottom of its ocean bed as it anchors down, tethering itself to eternity. I just felt that was so amazing description of what it may be like to be at the threshold of stepping over into a new reality, a new dimension in this sacred place. So when you think that we are really one breath away, we have a breath as we come into life, and we let go of our last breath as we go through the sacred threshold. It's a very deep sacred place. One of the things that happens, and I'm going to just start very briefly what happens when we are, or when people are at that space before they make that transition. A little later on, we'll go into a little bit more in depth about the stages, but just at this moment, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this breath, because when we may be sitting with someone who is dying, as they come towards this particular stage, it's not always the case, but very often people may become breathless, because this is the last element that goes, our breathing, our breath, the air. And so they can become a little, you could use the word panicky, but it's more to do with not quite knowing what is happening. And so their breath gets very shallow and short and fast. And so one of the things that we, as soul midwives or death walkers, or sitting with someone who's dying, one of the things that we can do is to breathe at the same time as the person who is dying. We sit and allow ourselves to breathe at this faster rate that the person is doing, and to gradually slow down our breath, and the person will get into rhythm, and that enables them to slow their breath too. Takes them into a softer, more relaxed place, so that there is not so much fear perhaps within them, not so much anxiety. And so we would do a breathing meditation with them. It's called mirrored breathing. And so that's what we would do. We would breathe in, and on the out breath, we would go, ah, and we breathe in, ah. So you may be doing that a little faster because you're doing it at the same rate as the person, but slowly you would allow that ah breath to become longer and longer. So gradually the person is feeling less anxious. Now, the other thing that we can do is this liquid light breath. And we think of Mary Magdalene with her light, her healing energy, her vibration energy. And one of the things that is a beautiful thing to do is to allow you to put your hand just over the person's heart and ask them to visualize this golden stream of light coming down as a channel through your hand, through your palm, to the person's heart. Now, you don't need to put your hand on their heart, but just above it. This is this beautiful vibrational healing energy, and this this golden light goes to not only to their heart, but it also goes to their lungs. And so this light comes through your palm as a channel of light breath coming into the lungs. And that also helps someone at that particular stage of letting go, of breathing more slowly, more gently, and sometimes this is the last breath they may take. Of course, we'll talk a little bit more later on about the last phase of dying, when we'll see how it works out for lots of other people too. But before we do that, I'd just like to do a short meditation which can take us into that space of being in a place where the person you're sitting with is in that last phase. And so I'd like to ask you perhaps to be with me. I think this will take 2 or 3 minutes. So what I would like you to do is to sit comfortably and close your eyes if you would like to, and just take a few breaths. Just breathing in and out, closing your eyes, taking a few breaths, just to allow yourself to soften and slow and just be with these words. And this is like speaking to someone actually who is dying. You are tired and weary, and the journey has been long. You are anxious about what might happen as the night draws in. Time is slow. Nothing feels quite the same as it once did, and you are moving gently towards a new horizon, journeying towards the end of time. What is the end? What is time? Where did it begin? And where did it end? Perhaps you are thinking about the life you have led, the people you have loved, your family, your pets, the homes you have lived in, the landscapes that you know so well, the sky, the fields and forests, the hills, the cities and towns. Where will you be next? Someone comes and sits next to you and takes your hand in theirs. It is soft and cool and calm. You can feel love pouring through it from their heart to yours. Now you are not alone. Someone is with you, bringing you strength and peace and a soothing, healing presence. You are safe. Soft aromas soothe you and bring colour and light to your heart. Memories, a summer's day, children laughing, the smell of flowers, a softly flowing green river, a kingfisher flying along its edge. The wind rustles in the trees high above your head, and the sky turns pink and mauve and golden as evening comes. The air is filled with soft sounds, gentle murmurings, tenderness and loving thoughts. Hands stroke away your fears. Their warmth and energy melt your worries and smooth away pain. Listen. A beautiful tune fills the room. A glorious, sonorous, luminous, harmonious, and melodic calling to the soul. It sweeps and soars, pure and tree and true. It bathes your body with healing sound like a bath of swirling notes and light. Let go, let go. Stretch wider as the light pours in, lifting you and filling you entirely. Like a shower of stars, you see the space around you opening up wider and wider and brighter. Soft pink, iridescent blue, shimmering green and delicate mauve are dancing, merging together and weaving a cloth of silver gold. Warm hands begin to wrap you in a soft blanket, which holds you tenderly with pure love and grace. You are held. You are safe. Time becomes timeless. Soft whispers in your ear tell you that you are so loved in this perfect moment. You have always been loved. You are the purest form of love imaginable. You came in love. You are returning to love. You are held in the soft and pure light of love. Your breath becomes weaker. Just rest. Just be peaceful. Just be. For this is the extraordinary moment when you are held between heaven and earth. Be and be loved, beloved. You are not alone. You are not alone. Take a deep sigh, hear your breath, and allow yourself to come back to this space. And open your eyes. If you were speaking to someone in this manner whilst you are sitting with them, at this time you would perhaps ask them if they are still with you in the sense that they can do this. You will have already perhaps worked with them to have a creative visualization of where they may see where they're going. So people will say, well, I see a boat tied up and it's waiting for me and I'm starting my journey. Or someone may visualize a beautiful garden where there's a fountain and the water is splashing and there are crystal drops of water. So people will gradually make up their own creative visualization to do that. So we have a sense there of this sacred threshold, but before we get to the sacred threshold, if we are sitting with someone over a period of time, it's good to know a little bit more about the stages of dying. Now, according to Eastern medicine, philosophy, particularly from the Buddhist tradition, it is said that there are 4 distinct stages of dying. Now, these can take place over weeks or months, but sometimes those stages become perhaps within a fortnight or even less time. And so these stages are both spiritual and psycho-spiritual as well as physical. And they're based on the idea that our bodies are made up of the 4 elements. And we will look at each element as a dying person would go through those elements. Just hold on a moment while I just... All right. So stage 1 is earth. And the earth, of course, element is linked to our bones, our flesh and our bones. And it's also related to our base chakra. And here, you will often find that people begin to lose their gravity in a sense. They they fall more easily. They feel heavier, their body feels heavier. They may have lots of falls and often you see people who fall out of bed. I do remember when my father was dying, this was one of the first signs of him falling out of bed several times and the nurse assistants coming in to help him back onto the bed. So this sort of thing often happens. The sense of smell is also affected at this stage, and although they may feel like eating something and request something that a favourite food, once it's brought to them, they often just cannot eat. And there's this change of smell around the person, maybe their breath or their skin. The complexion fades away and becomes loses its color, becomes a pallor, you know, that sort of greyish. And the person going through this phase often feels drained of energy and lethargic. So we're looking at that. They find it difficult to sit up in bed, and blankets and things feel heavy. So what are the things that we can offer at this stage? And we talk a little bit about the oils, because of course Mary Magdalene brings to us that beautiful Noora priestess energy of using oils. And in this first stage, some of the oils that are really useful are geranium, cedar, sandalwood, and patchouli. Some of you may have worked with these oils already, and you just need to have a sense of which would be the most useful at this time. Sandalwood would probably be a very good one to use, because it's one of those that supports people, giving them strength and courage and sturdiness in this time. Lifts the spirit as well, because this is the beginning stage, and so people need to be able to feel that they are and they still have life within them, of course, and we're thinking about them living all of this time until they take their last breath. Some of the other things you can do are using singing bowls in Tibetan bowls, or a muted drum with their heartbeat. But there's also what we might call therapeutic touch. So that's using oils on your hands, perhaps. You may smooth your hands over the body, but you don't need to actually put your hands on the body itself, because this is an energetic work that comes through our hands. And of course, our chakras in our hands hold a lot of that energy from the vibrational world. And this is the same sort of thing that Jesus did, was the laying on of hands, putting them close to the body. So this sort of may well help people just to be soothed and to feel that they've got courage and strength at this stage. So I think perhaps we'll move on to the stage 2, which is about water. And water relates to the blood, the taste, and the liquids of the body. And of course, we're made up of what, 70% water. And really, when you think about it, this water is sacred water within us. Our bodies are filled with this water, just like we breathe sacred breath. We have within us sacred water. So this relates to the sacral chakra, and taste, food, drink again may taste very strange, perhaps sweeter, perhaps more acidic. And some of the physical signs could be the losing control of bodily fluids. So noses run, eyes water, dribbling perhaps from the mouth, incontinences, all of those sorts of things that may happen during this water stage. There may be a difficulty in chewing or swallowing, and there may be a sensation of drowning, being pushed through water, feeling heavy, but also floating or sinking. So if people talk to you about that, I'm drowning, or feel like, it's this letting go of the watery element in the body. So when we're working with oils at this stage, we would probably use angelica, fragonia, geranium, and rose. Geranium again would be very useful, and rose. But you'll hear from now on that fragonia is almost like an essential oil at this stage as well, through each of the stages. At this stage also, you could use some of the vibrational essences, which include bark flowers, the Australian bushflower remedies, any kind of water-based homeopathic tinctures. They fit well with this watery element, and they're probably easy. Those flower essences are fairly easy to get access to. And again, there's the using singing can be a beautiful therapeutic technique, the sound and the voice. Here sometimes there's also chanting. The sound energy is very flowing. If we can do slow chanting, perhaps using a musical instrument. And in some of them, you know, there's the harp, and of course we know about the using the harp in music therapy, and lots of hospitals these days are offering musical therapy and in aged care. So musical therapy is a beautiful way in which to support someone through this stage and through all the stages, of course. Okay, so next we go to stage 3, which is the fire element. And this relates to all the major organs, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, and is associated with the solar plexus. Of course, that's where our fire is, where we take up our Malkuta or Malkatu. It's that I am energy of the solar plexus. So here the physical signs can be sudden and dramatic fluctuations in temperature. The body can really become so hot and the temperature raises, and then there's shivering. So they can be burning hot or shivering cold, as if with a fever. And so sometimes the whole skin looks dry and sallow when they're shivering, and then vividly flushing faces. Lips can become cracked and parched, and the mouth and nose dehydrate. And so this is where you need to be aware of putting maybe cotton balls dipped in fragrant in water, just to moisten the lips. And of course, this may be something that throughout each of the phases you might need to do for people. Okay. Oh, it does also suggest that people can get nosebleeds at this stage. Also, people can become quite irritable, quite frantic, quite anxious, and a lot of movements with the fingers, pulling at clothes, not quite sure what's happening to their skin. So there's this, and one of the ways in which you help someone to lessen this sort of frantic pulling at themselves is to take their hands. Again, this is this massaging of hands very, very gently, massaging the hands, the fingers, very smoothly and gently, because at this stage the skin may well be getting a little fragile, and that you again allow your rhythm on their hands to soften and slow down. So this is also a stage where people often can't eat or drink, and that they can't swallow very well at all. Okay. They're often not so interested in people, even their close family. They can't easily remember names of loved ones. And there's sometimes this shift from clarity and confusion, and eventually perhaps into some calm acceptance. They may also start seeing visions, but also seeing loved ones who have already passed through the sacred threshold. And sometimes prophetic dreams or dreams of glimpses of where they're going. So we now come to the last phase, which is the air. And of course, we know the last is our last breath. And so this air relates to our lungs and our ears. So it's about losing our hearing, losing our touch, the sense of touch. So here the breathing becomes laboured and erratic. There may be rasping and panting. There may be irregularity. And at this phase, we are using Fragonia and frankincense. Now, sorry to say, I didn't mention the oils in stage 3, which was the fire element, and that's fragonia, myrrh, and frankincense. And you could use some jasmine if that feels right. So we've got fragonia and frankincense now are the 2 main oils that are the best to use at this point. So this is where we do the mirrored breathing, and also where we can do the liquid light, because it's this losing breath and the breath becoming irregular, and the in-breath can be short and snatched, and the out-breath gets weaker and longer. So this is where we use that liquid breath technique. Again, we continue to use that light energy work, because that is like Reiki as well. Even though we're usually using our Reiki for healing, this is the healing sense of the healing to help people transition softly and beautifully. So any kind of therapeutic touch with our hands is always good. And again, music, soft flute music, and the harp again, any kind of lullabies, if you're singing lullabies, that's always really beautiful too. So we come to that last stage here, where the in-breath seems short and snatched and the out-breath weaker and longer. And of course, we know about the death rattle, which doesn't really affect the person who's dying. This is just what is, and this is the way we hear it, and it's called Cheyne-Stokes breathing. There may be some crying out, maybe feeling quite restless, and then emptiness. Now, I have a friend recently whose husband died, and she was with him. And in the last 2 or 3, well, maybe 3 or 4 days, he kept saying, "I'm in the void. I'm in the void. It's so big. It's so spacious. I'm just sitting here. I'm lying here." And he kept saying, "I'm in the void." And she kept wondering what on earth's going on, where is he? And yet she had a sense that he was at peace. It was like he was just waiting for the moment when he was actually going to breathe his last breath. And actually she was there with him when that actually happened. And of course, I'm coming to tears now because it's my friend. And of course, when she talks of it, she's grieving and in tears too. And so that last breath, when all these elements are withdrawn and the body is an empty shell. Now, this is where there is this separation of spirit and soul. Now, some people have different views about the separation of spirit and soul. I just want to read something to you about that. Here we are. Because this is really quite a beautiful moment. Okay, I'm going to read it again to you. This happens after death, not before. And so when you're sitting with someone, it's good to just sit quietly, to turn out lights, to remove any harsh or things in the room, which is quite interesting because it's said that people can become attached to the things that surround them. So they stay in that place. So, all right, so the spirit is the transitory and ego-based aspect of our personality relating to who we've been. And it is fused to the ego and drives us on, throughout our lives, upwards and soaring upwards, and it goes up in a spiraling upwards. Okay, the soul is our eternal template, the map of everything we are and have the potential to be, and the soul spans all time and eternity. It is the great I am presence of the mystics, the primordial image of who we are. Its nature is deep, solemn, and permanent, and it is immortal. And it evolves in a downward spiral, downwards, labyrinthine and circular movement, and after death, it completes its evolution back to the source of all being. So, and this is what Mary Magdalene would have known, of course, all of these things that happen to spirit and soul. And that's where she brings this beautiful light energy, and she's there. Yeshua. Okay, so the spirit goes clockwise, the soul goes anti-clockwise. Okay, so I mentioned my friend and grief. How are we going for time? Oh gosh, okay. I just want to mention a little bit about the grief. Now, the person dying, when you think about it, the person dying is going to lose not only the wife or spouse, but the loved one, but their brothers and sisters, their children and grandchildren, if they have grandchildren. So they have this whole level of grief that as they're dying, they realize that they're losing all of these people in their lives. We, in one sense, are losing one person, them. And so there's this beautiful way in which we can acknowledge the dying person's grief that they're working through, and our own grief at the end. And so there are many people around who can work with someone going through grief and loss, and of course talking about them. Talking about how you're feeling, what your emotions are, but allowing that grief which arises like an ocean wave and overwhelms you. And the best thing to do is to actually go with it, allow it to fall over you and allow yourself to express that grief. Because when the wave goes over you and crashes down, it then flows back into the ocean, and it allows you to have some sense of peace, some sense of equilibrium, and then in a way you become ready for the next overwhelming wave, because in those early weeks this is what it's going to be. And most of you will have experienced this in one form or another with someone who is loved in your life. So I think because our time is getting on, I might not talk any more about grief, other than to say that grief takes its own time. For each person, grief takes its own time. And we have to allow that, and not say, oh, pull up your socks, or, oh, you know, it's 6 months, why aren't you feeling better? Or, you know, these sorts of comments really don't help anybody, because our grieving takes its own time, and we have to be full of mercy, compassion, love, healing for any of our friends and family who are going through this.
And it pops up in all sorts of strange places.
Yeah.
It does. it doesn't just continue along one line. You know, so a smell or a flower or an incident, like putting up the flags at in our dance circle. That always reminds me of Peter, because it was his job, and now I have to do it.
Yes, yes, beautiful, beautiful. Yes. So thanks, Sophia Jane. That was lovely. I was thinking of you a little earlier too, when we were talking about grief, and of course your own experience with Peter. So,
yes, I wanted to give you that experience, but we moved on, so I'll leave it now.
Right. Okay. So Anna Sophia, that for me at this point now, if there's anything later on you want to ask, maybe there'll be a little time for that. But now Anna Sophia is going to offer us the second beatitude, Tu Bwehu Lawile.
You're muted, Anna Sophia. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
All right. So what I've done is put the second beatitude in Aramaic in the chat box. For those unfamiliar, this was the language that Yeshua spoke in. And of course, he was known as the Christed One at the time when Mary Magdalene anointed him, and we looked at that last time. And why this beatitude is so meaningful right now, because it says, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. But also, it has a sense of, blessed are they that wander, who are confused by life, and for they shall find the warm arms of love surrounding them, something like that. And there's a lot of confusion and the chaos of life that we need to embrace as preparing ourselves for our own death, or for being present for another person's death, means that we need to develop our own stability, our own equanimity, our own compassion for self as well. So all of these things, and one of the biggest things for preparing ourselves for our own death and helping us to be at someone else's death and be comfortable with it, is the letting go, is the detachment. So we can have, it's like the Inanna process, or how she goes down in the descent and she lets go of all her physical ornamentations, her clothes, her roles in life, and until the end she's stripped naked and there's nothing left. And there are spiritual exercises that you can do, meditations, visualizations, which help you do that journey for yourself, so that you can realize that in the end, who are you but eternal soul? Like Annie was saying, the eternal soul. And the spirit is the breath that animates us, but that returns, that whooshes upwards, like you were talking. And so the Tu Bwehu Lawile helps us come to terms with all the ways that we grieve every day. We can grieve for the little things we've lost, for the things that have just gone. We can grieve for the world situation. We can grieve for how we would like things to be, and yet unfulfilled. And in this beatitude that Yeshua gave, it was about realizing the visions that we want to have for our life, and to see that they may unfold in some way. So even the soul that's departing, we see them in that vision of returning to the light, being filled with the light. And the same way in our journey in life, when we wander and confused, we want to have the vision. We want to develop that vision of how we would like life to be. And that's what I encourage for all of us to do now, when there is a lot to distract us, and there is a lot of concern for us too, of things that are happening in the world, and that can be very confusing. And this is our own sense of grief, really, that the things that we've lost, our everyday ways that we were accustomed to seeing things. So even that is a letting go. Anyway, I'll sing it for you. And, oh, I really need this. Tu vei hun lawi lei dehanon nitbayun. 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 Just think of all those people and places that you are mourning, that you are letting go of, releasing them, shining the light onto their journey back home in whatever situation it may be. Tu vei hun lawi lei dehanon nitbayun. 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 It always touches me so deeply in my heart, but I feel also that the comforting of that melody and the longing, it's something that moves and stirs the heart to be present. So anything we can do to make ourselves comfortable in our letting go process will help someone else in that time of death as well. So we need to look at our own beliefs, how we approach these things. And many traditions also have practices for the dead, for us living, that can say for the dead when they're dying. The Tibetans and the Sufis also have the 7 weeks afterwards. We have the 7 names of God, which are the qualities that help the soul pass over. So in every spiritual tradition, there's something that assists the soul to move on, and we are still alive. So, yeah. So all in our journey, we just need to be looking all the time at how we can trust the beloved to fulfill our sacred purpose, and to do that, we look at how we can purify ourselves, purify the egoic self, so that our soul self, our higher self, is more prepared to do the bigger journey once we depart as well. So all those things that would tie us hold us back, and an unnecessary, very heavy grief of attachment stops a soul from moving onwards as well. So we have to be aware, and many have related that. They hear their companion that's passed over saying, "Don't grieve so much. I want you to be happy, and I'm in a good place now. Let go of me. Be happy." Acknowledging that we still need to go through our grief, because if we worry about the little things that we lose and we grieve over those, imagine the big things when we lose them. Yeah. Every day we get practice. We get practice at death and dying. And I want to just finish up with Mary Magdalene from the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. This was a Gospel that was contained in France, said to be written by Mary Magdalene. And in the chapter 42, well, after Yeshua had died, had passed on, and was in his new form, but still the apostles didn't believe what was going on. They just said, look, when Mary Magdalene came to them and told them what she had seen and what Yeshua had said, they were grieving and wept greatly. And they said, how shall we go out and preach the gospel of the kingdom of the Son of Humanity? If they did not spare him, how will they spare us? So then the Magdala came as the comforter, and the woman of wisdom, and she said, only from the truth I tell you, do not weep, and do not grieve or be irresolute, for his grace and that of the one who sent him will be entirely with you and will protect you. Rather, let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us and made us truly human. So it's very interesting. The truly human is the anthropos, the full human experience. And this is what it said salvation is. The Gnostic understanding of salvation is to be this true anthropos that can balance, like Mary Magdalene talked to, balancing the true, the good and the beautiful, which is with the pain and the suffering on the other hand. So becoming a fully rounded human being. And then she began to discuss the words of Yeshua. They said, well, you knew him better than all of us. You tell us what he told you. And the Magdala, which is the watchtower, that's what she was, she said, what is hidden from you, I will proclaim to you. My master spoke thus to me. He said, Miriam, blessed are you who came into being before coming into being, and whose eyes are set upon the kingdom, who from the beginning has understood and followed my teachings. Only from the truth I tell you, there is a great tree within you that does not change, summer or winter, and its leaves do not fall. Whosoever listens to my words and ascends to its crown will not taste death, but know the truth of eternal life. And this is the work that we were doing last year when we did the Path of the Rosary, the Mary Magdalene Rosary, was to go through the journey of this great tree. She goes on to describe it in 42. And the first branch that she comes to is, I eat the fruit of love and compassion, and I'm freed from anger and wrath. So at each stage, there is the building of qualities for our being and the antidote to the negative parts like anger and wrath. And by this way, we purify ourselves, and then those who would grab or seize the soul after the death experience, saying, well, you're not perfected in this space, in this level, are not able to hold on to the soul, because the soul has been purified of the different levels that would hold it back, the different negativities. And having said that, I've heard that it's just pure love on the other side, and love is very forgiving. And but we do what we can in our life's purpose to set our sights on the goal of purification and on the great tree within us that takes us from the darkness into the light. As I said, that we journey from the roots of the tree, which is the darkness, to the top of the tree, which is the eternal light and the eternal life of the spirit. So having said that, we there's a lot in it, but it's to encourage us to know, to keep cultivating love and forgiveness and trust. And also, when we were going through the elements, what Mary Magdalene and all the spiritual adepts would have been very good at was to develop the inner senses. So that's the inner sense of sight and hearing especially. So when you shut off the outer senses, you get more of the inner light and the inner hearing, the sound. So the more in touch we are with our own inner being and our own inner senses, the faculties, when they disappear on the outside, we're more in connection with our journey. So this week is something we can practice now as well. So that leads us now to our completion, and we thought we'd complete with a beautiful song, and which is also a dance. And if you want to know any more about the journey on the Tree of Life, there are a lot of Zooms that we have that took us through the journey. We did it through every new moon and full moon last year. And just write to me and I can tell you. But it's really good to get a copy of the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. And mine's actually on Kindle, so I can refer to it anytime. And they don't cost much. But it's wonderful. When you read it, it's just like, yeah, this makes sense. This is like a Mary's account of the journey with Yeshua, with her beloved. Yay. So I'll just find this music, and it's from Song of Solomon's. Set me as a seal upon your heart, for love is as strong as death. Or I'd say love is stronger than death. And then we have some words again, I think they're in Hebrew or Aramaic. I've got my book here. Akiazeh, come away, haba. So let me just see where I've got that. No. Music. Dancing with Mary. No. Okay. Music. Daughter and light. Love is as strong as death. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. For love is as strong as death. He has come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. For love is as strong as death. He has come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. For love is as strong as death. He has come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. For love is as strong as death. He has come away. He has come away. He has come away. Okay, so this brings us to to the end of our second Zoom, and I hope that we've given you a lot to think about and to prepare you for this wonderful journey. And thank you so much, Stella, Noora, for guiding us also into these stages of death and the oils. I've still got to get my Fregonia. I've definitely got to get it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say,
Yes.
this book is worth buying,
Yeah, I've got it.
and it's written by Felicity Warner again. She wrote the last one that we were talking about, Sacred Oils. A Safe Journey Home.
Mm,
Can you see that?
yeah.
A Simple Guide to Achieving a Peaceful Death by Felicity Warner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
So when I did the course, I actually have this,
Oh, beautiful.
and so it's like a manual. So it was really worth doing that course. I would recommend anything that Felicity Warner offers. I see that she has 2 short courses on at the moment on dying. They're all by Zoom, of course, but she has been doing these online Zoom courses for some time. So if you look up her website, which is soulmidwives.co.uk, you'll see what she has on offer, and really I can't recommend them more highly if you
Yeah.
want to further any of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone. It has been lovely to be part of the Zoom, and there are so many more things to say about this this whole sacred threshold and the journey towards it. That is so deep and wise and takes us to such incredible places of wisdom. So there we are. So I hope all goes well with you. I'm going to leave you now, actually, because I'm going out for lunch.
Oh, beautiful.
So
Okay.
thank you all, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
It's
for
lovely
being
to see you.
present. Is there, before I finish the recording, is there anything anyone wants to say or add? Everyone's
It's
good?
really beautiful session. Thank you very much. Thank
Yeah. I feel
Thank you, Arjuna.
just by being in each other's presence, somehow more prepared, somehow. I've done a lot of things with other people, but just being in this little soul group that we have, I feel the support of each other, and I feel Mary Magdalene's presence there on our right shoulder. And I'd maybe just like to finish with that prayer. So, blessed are you, Mary, for you did not waver at the sight of the risen Master, you who are his companion and whom he loved more than any other woman. Holy Bride, Apostle of the Apostles, be at my right shoulder as I walk forth in the infinite light, and bless me with the eternal balm of your healing presence. Amen. Amen.
Amen.